All right, we're good.
Well, yes, I think we're live.
Oh my God! So to the viewers that are listening, sorry that I gave you like 3 different hangouts. I suck at YouTube. Sorry about that. Nico has graciously helped me out. All right.
Yeah, I'm not much better.
Well, slightly better than me. So for all of you that are listening, this is going to be on telegony, microchimerism, and essentially, scientifically speaking, we're going to talk about sloppy seconds.
Yeah.
And basically, and what that has to do with gene transfer. In essence, can you have a kid or someone who's like you without actually impregnating a woman? And scientifically speaking, that seems relatively possible. So Nico, why don't you take it away for a little bit, because you're the one that brought it to my attention. So you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna take credit for this. I'm gonna blame CS McTow for this. He gave me this article that really fucked with me. So the article is from Ecology Letters, published in 2014. It's called "Revisiting Telegony: Offspring Inherit an Acquired Characteristic of Their Mother's Previous Mate." Now, doesn't really have to do with humans. It talks about flies, and I know flies are a lot smaller than humans, but the majority of the gene research, from what I understand, has been done on fruit flies. Am I wrong?
Yes, so Drosophila melanogaster, yes.
Okay, so in this particular experiment, I'm still not sure why they did this particular experiment. Yeah, so they basically mated one female fly with 2 different partners, but the first partner was in essence sterile, so they killed off his sperm production, yet he was still able to produce, I guess, semen, if you can say that. Then the fly didn't stay pregnant, didn't get pregnant, sorry, and after 2 weeks, when the fly had another cycle, they mated the fly again with another male partner. Now, the resulting offspring had the phenotype, or resembled the phenotype, of the first partner. Now, that means that what the baby, if you would like, or what the baby fly looked a lot more than with the first partner, the one that didn't exchange DNA with the female fly, but rather than the second partner that actually exchanged DNA. And they've done PCR analysis, and they've determined that the baby fly is indeed of the second partner, but the gene expression, I guess, resembled a lot more the first partner. Now, where do we go from here?
For everyone that doesn't know, so PCR is polymerase chain reaction. It's basically it's using DNA, so it was basically used to see which fly the offspring came from, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So genetically, the second offspring came from not the second offspring. The offspring came from the second partner and the female partner. All right. So, but it looked like the first partner, the one that didn't actually give its sperm to to the fly. Now, this gives us a problem, and they determined this type of inheritance called telegony. And we're not really sure as to what causes this, because it's not directly related to, let's say, DNA transfer, as we initially assumed it to be, but it has to do with DNA expression, right?
Yeah, I mean, because obviously genetically, so DNA-based pairs, they are genetically linked to the first male fly, right? Or the second male fly.
Yeah.
But we know that how someone looks, the phenotype, is based not only on genetics, but epigenetics, imprinting, and then probably other things that we don't even know about at this point. So somehow, and here's the thing is, we're spitballing here, but no one knows. So somehow the first mate, the first fly, passed something on to the female. It wasn't his chromosomes. He passed something on to her. Something that modified, at this point, it must have modified the the epigenetics of her eggs at
Yeah.
some way, the epigenetics of her chromosomes in her eggs at some way, shape, or form, somehow modified her to basically epigenetically imprinted himself into her DNA or onto the DNA and the proteins that, you know, the histones that wrap the DNA, essentially, and all the chromatin associated proteins. So spitballing here, because again, no one knows. So when you ejaculate, you're not only releasing sperm, which, you know, have your chromosomes packaged into you with protamine, which are different than histones, but you release hormones, and you're releasing also probably a plethora of chromatin modifying proteins as well. I mean, that happens in meiotic division, and those proteins are meant to compact the DNA. They're meant to modify the DNA, blah, 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 blah. So you're ejaculating these chromatin modifying proteins, which can epigenetically change chromatin, right? Not genetically, but epigenetically. Mm-hmm. So the only spitball thing that I think of is that the first fruit fly, he didn't pass on his sperm to her, but he passed on some type of epigenetic modifiers that modified her eggs in such a way whereby he had paternal imprinting on her eggs, which is crazy. And I don't know how that, as people are going to ask, what's the mechanism? Well, the mechanism is we don't fucking know.
Yeah, we don't know. And actually, if you read the paper, they're suggesting that it's not epigenetics. But let's make things a lot simpler. Let's make it a lot simpler for people who are listening to this. Imagine the DNA is just a line of letters, but that line of letters is fucking massive, right? So it's just coiled up into chromosomes, and I mean like really coiled up. And what the DNA basically talks about, and it gets basically translated into proteins, and the proteins carry a function. But how that DNA in each gene is translated it is basically based on the kind of enzymes that are lying around, on how the DNA is coiled in itself. There's a lot of things that play a role. So if the way that they did the experiment, they used alpha flies, I guess, and beta flies, and then they saw which one the offspring resembled more. And the offspring resembled more the first partner at all times, and with a high degree of significance, actually, statistically speaking, which means that the effect is real. Now, in the research paper, which actually had a discussion of a page and a half, I've never seen a discussion that big.
I know. Yeah. They did a page and a half. I was like, well, first of all, the page and a half, the experiment opened up a lot more questions than it gave answers, which is totally cool. Like, that's awesome. But yeah, page and a half was for a discussion is actually pretty.
Yeah, they even said that they don't think it's an epigenetic effect, but I don't understand how DNA expression can be altered in any other way other than epigenetics. I guess even that should be called epigenetics, even if we don't know the mechanism.
Yeah, because they said, it's funny, they said, it's not epigenetically, but then I go, well, what's your definition of epi? Because every scientist has a different, right? Epigenetics just means, for epigenetics, you ask 10 different scientists what epigenetics are, and they're all going to have a different answer. For me, the broad thing of epigenetics is changes to transcription that is beyond just the genetic code. So in that sense, I disagree with them where they're saying it might not be epigenetic. I think that it might not be epigenetic based on whatever their definition is, because epigenetics is, there's like broad definitions, but what some people might consider an epigenetic changes, other people might consider not. So I disagree with them on that, just based on, they're like, it couldn't be epigenetic. And I go, well, that's closing a huge door, and it's also in a discussion whereby I think that was a broad overarching statement that they should not have made. I just don't agree with it because they don't have support. I mean no offense to them, but a better writing, they should have written that it could be, we cannot rule this out yet, because they can't. Right? They're not able to rule it out yet.
I think they were excited with their finding, and they just wanted to show that it's something that's completely independent of DNA. What they basically showed that was that they were able to affect DNA expression of someone without the DNA transfer taking place. So it wasn't basically altering the DNA expression of the sperm that was being transferred. It was altering the DNA expression, I'm presuming, of the eggs that were sitting there, right?
Yeah.
Well, the question later goes is, can that happen to humans?
Yeah, and so, I mean, let's think about this just from an anatomical standpoint, right? Females have a set amount of eggs, and they sit there, right? They sit there. That's why we say the eggs get old, right? Men, on the other hand, right, our sperm are constantly turning over. It's like crop rotation, right? We have fresh crops all the time. So being that female eggs, her genetic code for mating, that is just sitting there, that means that, say, if anything were to happen, right, if say, a man ejaculated and maybe his sperm didn't fertilize the egg, but some semblance of his semen got near her eggs and just did whatever it did, because we don't know what they're doing, clearly. Her eggs are going to, that's permanent, right? Her eggs don't, whatever happens to those eggs does not get overturned, right?
Yeah.
So her eggs are sitting there. So whatever non-genetic code that is being passed on from male to female in these non-pregnancy sex acts is going to stay with those eggs forever until they're good and old and withered. So yes, the next question is so her eggs are sitting there, they're stable. Whatever happens to them is stably going to happen to them. There's no turnover, not like sperm. Can this happen in humans? And Nico, take that away.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if people really know what happens to sperm after sperm and semen together after it's being ejaculated in the vaginal canal. The sperm is being propelled upwards into the uterus, and then the sperm basically swims up through the oviducts. If there is no egg there to fertilize, it will still continue to swim up through the oviducts, and then it will empty in the abdominal area. So it basically goes where their intestines are, if that makes any sense. Now, the ovaries are just sitting there. I don't think anyone has ever asked the question or ever wondered to see what will happen to the sperm after it reaches the eggs, or after it reaches the ovaries, or whether it just affects the overlying eggs that are sitting there. Now, there is obviously a layer that covers the ovaries, I mean, protecting the eggs and all that. But it doesn't mean these tiny, tiny, tiny molecules will not be able to penetrate or have some sort of an effect to the eggs.
There's a layer. There's pores, there's obviously ion channels, there's, right, yeah, exactly. I mean, good protein, so the weird part is that, right, there's layers. So, I mean, it's not, so if you take cells in tissue culture, right, and you put DNA on them without any type of vector, without any type of, like, vehicle to get the DNA, the cells will actually still take up the DNA, albeit very, very poorly, with very poor, very, very low transfection efficiency. And they'll be able to take up the DNA and whatever other factors you put on them. It'll be super low. The efficiency will be like maybe 0.5, 0.1%. But on the other hand, if you're dealing with millions of molecules, right, 0.1% is still still enough to infect several hundred or thousand cells, right? Or at least for them to. But what's incredible is that right, the egg is right. I mean, the DNA is in the nucleus, right? So you have to get through the cell, right? It has to survive the cytoplasm, whatever is there, not the DNA. I mean, whatever epigenetic factors that need to modify the DNA have to get through the cytoplasm, right, without getting degraded. Right? If there are proteins, there's proteases all over the place, ubiquitin ligases, blah, blah, blah. They have to get through that. They have to get into the nucleus, right? which is like, this is like breaking out of this is like, breaking into the CIA, right? They got to get into the nucleus, and then they got to modify the DNA inside the nucleus. So it's no small feat that these factors are somehow getting into the egg nucleus of maybe 10,000 eggs, right? And actually modifying them. Right?
I mean, it's not unlikely I mean, we don't know. That is the thing. And if this is happening in flies, I see no reason why it cannot happen to humans.
Absolutely. I mean, and what lends credibility, I think, to it happening in humans, I mean, is that at this point it's not linked, but I believe they are linked, is microchimerism, right? I mean, females, whereby when males are ejaculating into females for mating, right? They, in post-mortem brain tissue, they find, we talked about this before, they're finding males, the Y chromosome of males floating around in their brain tissue, right? 40 years after, right? So clearly in humans, men are able to quite literally infect women with their DNA, and it goes to their brain, it's found in their bloodstream. Even when when a woman's pregnant and the fetus and the woman exchange DNA, and so if it's a male, by the way, a male fetus, male baby, his Y chromosome is the same as that of his father's for all intents and purposes. So he's getting the father's Y chromosome, right? And so they find it in their bloodstream, Y chromosomes in their bloodstream. They find them in the brain. How that crosses the blood-brain barrier is beyond me. No idea.
Me neither. And we talked actually, I remember I discussed with you that there is a mechanism in which antigens can get recognized
Sure.
by close proximity. So a partner having a close proximity with a female, the partner's antigens, and the antigens are basically parts of the cell that the immune system might recognize in order to attack, right? Those antigens get recognized, and then the immune system learns not to attack those parts of the male. So it is a lot more likely that a female will accept, let's say, a child from that partner. And that's why they say, you know, relationships that have been going on for a while or whatever, they're more likely to get pregnant. That's because there's a close proximity. The immune system is more used to the partner's DNA and his antigens and whatever, and therefore it's a lot more likely to get pregnant like that. Now, if the DNA, if the Y chromosome can go to the brain, right, even if it comes from the fetus, right, it still has to travel a long way in order to go to the brain, right? It's not that someone ejaculates in a woman's mouth and then instantly he infects her brain. That doesn't happen.
That does not happen.
That doesn't happen at all. If that's what you guys are thinking, that's not happening. But realistically, if it enters the bloodstream in whatever way, whichever means possible, etc., it can travel everywhere. And if we can find Y chromosomes in the brain, then
and survives, which is crazy. And so to people, so whenever we're talking about this, sometimes I can understand why people are like, what the fuck are they chromatin? So let's, like, I think a picture speaks a million words, not 1,000. So let me screen share a nucleosome. So let's see how we do this.
Mind you not get not doxing yourself, basically. Make sure you don't have anything around or your name or anything like that.
I don't think I do, but I'm dumb like that, so that can happen. Let's see. No, I think we're close this and go keep talking.
Yeah, okay, all right. While he's trying to do that, I mean, man, this question really, really troubles me. I mean, the potential implications are vast. That means you can potentially alter the DNA expression for a female and make the DNA expression of that female to look potentially like yours without getting that female pregnant. You're basically getting her DNA pregnant, if that makes any sense.
How that happens. So here we go, guys. So this, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at a nucleosome. So I'm going to explain what the fuck is a nucleosome. So, hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
I'm here. Okay. Yeah. So essentially, a nucleosome is an octamer. It's eight proteins, and essentially it wraps the DNA. Now, what happens is, essentially, DNA can only be expressed if it's not wrapped. So imagine trying to read a book if it's super glued shut,
Yeah.
Right? So, and a nucleosome wraps DNA because DNA is like, I don't know, like a football field long, right? How do you get that into each and every cell, without, yeah, how do you get it into every cell, right?
Yep.
So nucleosomes essentially compact it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they compact it to basically be able to fit inside every cell. So in order to read the book, you need to say loosen up the superglue, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? So you loosen up the superglue by modifying the nucleosome, modifying the proteins to say not bind to it so tightly. So you can methylate, you can glycosylate, you can sumoylate, you can phosphorylate. You guys can look these up. So put in epigenetic modifications, right?
Yeah.
And essentially, this will, what's the word for it? In essence, it can loosen up the DNA. This is not the only way that it can happen. It can loosen up the DNA, and then the DNA can be transcribed. So somehow these epigenetic modifications can be
transferred with the semen. I mean, that is what they're, well, that's not what they're suggesting. They're suggesting there might be some sort of magic that might be doing this.
Yeah, but
theoretically.
yeah, they're like, well, it's not epigenetics. I'm like, well, then what is it? I'm not, because epigenetics is such a broad field. I'm like, well, it could be.
After all, I mean, in the production of sperm cells, spermatocytes, etc., what happens is that you can find epigenetic modifiers and epigenetic sensors on top of the spermatozoa that are being produced, right? So all those things might potentially go into the semen, even if that semen contains no sperm. I mean, I'm very confused as to how that happens. It could be produced by the prostate. It could be produced by a number of glands that are lying around. It could just naturally be produced by all the excretions that we ever have in our, in our body, and maybe close proximity.
We're constantly sloughing off DNA like every 5 seconds. I mean, so how does it happen? Okay. How does it happen? I mean, they don't, everyone goes, well, you guys don't know how it happens. I'm like, well, no, nobody does, but it's happening. So how it happens, I mean, we're constantly exchanging DNA. I mean, viruses exchange DNA to bacteria exchange DNA with each other. But we always say they're exchanging DNA, but why can't they be exchanging other factors? So let's think beyond just DNA. Why can't you exchange proteins with one another that could modify DNA?
Yeah.
Why can't you do that, right? We always, I mean, the composition of semen is actually not very well known. They're like, well, there's sugar and there's, sperm and testosterone, but there's a lot of other things.
That's a good meal as well. It's a good meal with potentially good nutrients. That's what I always suggest to girls.
Lots of DHT. There's some estrogen in there.
But I mean that it's a whole different area. I mean, potentially epigenetics is the newest kind of like area of research where people are constantly doing like trying to understand what actually happens, because reading the code from left to right doesn't mean a lot of things. I mean, people have said that you can read the code in the opposite direction. They found fucking enzymes that can do that. You can find all sorts of ways that you can read the DNA code differently. And all of the code, even if that code, translates for a gene, it might be potentially wrapped up so tightly that you don't really see what's happening. So if you can get any cell from a single human being, any fucking cell, right? And that cell will contain within it the entire DNA ever.
Yeah.
That you need to build a human being, right? But that cell will express different proteins in order to produce something else. And in the sperms, let's say in the testicular area of the human being, or in the reproductive organs of a lot of animals that we have lying around, or we have around living in our homes, etc., it benefits the male that he's able to transfer DNA, even through an epigenetic modifier, right? Even to just make it a lot more likely that the bond will be more successful through that area, through the genes that might be expressed in that area. So it is definitely possible, and this research shows us that this is entirely possible. Anatomically speaking, females are born with all the eggs. So a single, let's say, female baby that is born will be born with all of the eggs she will ever have, right? There's no more eggs. From the point that she's born, she continuously starts to run out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a very wasteful process. But if all those potential babies are sitting there, why not alter their DNA expression, right? Why not create a mechanism, evolutionary speaking, that will alter the DNA expression? What was it? Selfish Gene that Richard Dawkins made. He says that it's all about the gene being transferred to the next generation. That's potentially what evolution is. But if you can alter the expression of one gene to basically translate for the same product in the end, you can definitely do that. It's a totally new way of viewing things. This is a one step further.
It's funny because Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
No, not Dawkins. I'm thinking of Watson, or was it Crick that said that? No, Watson. Watson and Crick were they were basically the ones that were credited with discovering the structure of DNA. I think in all his fame, Watson, I think, works at Woods. I met the guy, kind of weird dude. In all his fame, he just said, epigenetics is, something. He said this one. He doesn't even study epigenetics. And he just was like, he doesn't even study it. He's like, epigenetics is like the new frontier. And then everyone's like, oh, that's so wise. I'm like, dude, you don't even study it. You said, it's just funny because even in science, we're like all about the data, but it's still like a social club, to be honest. Even in science, people, they're like, oh my God, if Watson says it, it must be. I'm like, the dude hasn't had a great discovery in like 40 years. But no, sorry, I ran over. I mean, his discovery was he hasn't done anything since, but the guy gets like $1 billion. It's unreal. He just sits on his ass and says things. But yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you come first, I guess. When you go first and discover something first, you just attach your name everywhere and you become famous. That's how science works at the end of the day.
Yeah, basically, it's and who can get scooped before. Essentially, but actually, the DNA structure of DNA. What was they say that a woman actually discovered it before they did. Forgot her name off the top of my head. Because they were the ones that. There was a woman that gave them a tip off of the structure of DNA, and then they kind of went back to their lab after the story goes. After the conference where she showed some of the data, and they just like worked their asses off and. I think she found the structure before they published it before her, and so they really got all the credit. So it really goes to show you, it's about who waves the flag. It's not about who gets there first. It's about who yells loud enough that they got there first.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of research right now. I mean, people are becoming home scientists. Well, they just become scientists in the back garage. It doesn't cost that much to buy one of those machines that just prints DNA in a series. You just get all the things that you need. You get the A, the T, the C, the G, and you're good, right? You can just create DNA from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, I do PCR, polymerase chain reaction, every day. It's not very hard. You can clone, you can do all these things. As long as, the initial equipment's a few $1,000, but once you have the equipment, you can do that. I mean, you really can if you have the know-how and you have the you can do that. I mean, it's just like the fact that I can make human growth hormone in my lab if I wanted to, right?
Yeah.
And I could make pharmaceutical grade. You can inject it in yourself and get all big and strong. But yeah, the technology to do this is actually, it's with a little technical know-how, you could do it easily. Furthermore, what? Sorry.
I was just going to say that a lot of people right now understand the function of a gene by just what you do in the lab. You basically find an area that you suspect the genetic code codes for something that you think it's important. You amplify that gene, that section of the DNA, basically. Then you transfer that gene to an organism that can potentially do it, or you switch off that gene by creating an organism without that gene, and then you see what the function is. But it doesn't mean that's how that gene is expressed inside that human being, right? We don't know if that gene is actually expressed, even if it is present.
Yeah, so you know, people look at naked DNA and they go, okay, well, it's expressed for, say, I don't know, an actin gene, a tubulin gene, right, and make microtubules, right? And they go, let's make it more interesting. Let's say, I gotta pick my favorite. I'm on the spot. What's my favorite gene? I want to pick an important one because actin's everywhere. That's boring. Let's pick my favorite gene would be BAP1. Yeah.
What does that do?
HMGB1. HMGB1's my fave.
What does that do?
What?
What does that do? What does the gene do?
HMGB1. So it stands, and everyone goes, well, how did they make these names? I'm a scientist, and I don't even know how they make names for some of these fucking proteins. The protein name is high mobility group protein B1. That has no correlation to what it does, but there you go. So what is HMGB1? HMGB1 is a DNA binding protein that associates with chromatin. Chromatin is DNA plus protein bound to each other generally. And it has the ability to quite literally bend DNA. So it binds preferentially to single-strand DNA. Now, most of our DNA is double-stranded, but there are single-stranded telomeric repeats in the end that can be single-stranded. And DNA will be single-stranded when it's in S phase, and it's getting, well, at least initially it will be single-stranded when it's in S phase and when it's being replicated during the cell cycle. Mm-hmm. And so HMGB1 is a chromatin-modifying protein. Now, HMGB1, as far as we know, it has the ability to actually modify DNA, but it's pretty tightly regulated in its expression because it has the ability to modify DNA. So you don't want this protein floating around if it's going to modify DNA without the cell knowing it or at a wrong time, right, a bad time when the cell doesn't need its DNA modified. So what happens is the dogma of molecular biology, right, it's DNA to mRNA, messenger RNA to protein, right? Mm-hmm. So for the DNA that encodes the protein to be transcribed, right, you would want this the cell would say, you know what, we only want this protein floating around in G1 phase. That's when we need it the most. We don't want it floating around. We want it floating around for about 8 hours during the cell cycle, but after that, we can't have that. So it's in the cell's best interest to wrap the DNA real tight and put it into a heterochromatin boundary whereby there's very low expression, and to make it basically to protect it from being transcribed, because you have DNA polymerase, RNA polymerase is floating all around. They don't know what to transcribe and what not to transcribe. They can only they'll transcribe whatever they can get to. So if DNA is tightly bound, they'll try to get in there and they go, well, I can't get in here, so I'll just float away. Right? So it's, right, and so it's within the cell's best interest to keep these proteins really, really tightly bound and to keep them from, or these DNA from being transcribed and then translated into a protein. So in essence, if a cell can do this at the DNA genetic level, and all it takes is for a DNA to be not transcribed or be transcribed, and you could completely change what proteins are in a cell and thereby its phenotype, right? Because proteins are really the workhorses of a cell. Then who's to say when you ejaculate into a woman that you're not passing along some chromatin modifying proteins that are going to go into her eggs somehow? Don't ask me the mechanism. They're going to go in there and start modifying the DNA to transcribe proteins differently. right? What's the difference between a liver cell and a skin cell? They both contain the same DNA. It's what proteins are transcribed and then translated, right? It's what proteins are floating around. In simplistic terms, it's what proteins are floating around that really gives a cell characteristics. Mm-hmm. So if you can modify the DNA so that the cell only expresses protein certain times, other times, then you could modify really the phenotype of a cell. Right.
Yeah, and when we're talking about we're talking about cells that are sitting there with half the DNA. Even a tiny alteration at the time will completely change the DNA expression of the entire, let's say, offspring. That's as big of an effect as you can imagine, right? Because a tiny change in the expression of a certain gene, or one gene or two genes in the DNA on how it's called up, can potentially change the whole offspring, because then everything will be amplified and everything will get super specialized afterwards. But the alteration in that DNA structure or whatever might stay there. And we don't really know the mechanism. We have no idea. We're just making assumptions right now, and we're making assumptions on what we know.
We know how proteins modify DNA. We know how epigenetic proteins work. I mean, this has been what proteins are being passed on. I'm gonna say they're proteins for this. They could be other things that I don't know about. What proteins are being passed on to the egg by the first male that doesn't impregnate her? How they're getting into the cell, and what loci they're modifying is. It's a black box. It's a cool black box, I'll give you that. It's also a freaky black box, because let's take this. So guys listening to this, let's take this from science to that chick you just banged. Okay? So think about all the sexual partners that you've had, right, men, and think about all of them that didn't get pregnant. Okay? Right? And if this
hopefully all of them.
Hopefully, right? Okay. Think about right. And then think about that after you, there was another guy that she settled down with, and they had kids. But let's say that while this one chick that you were banging for a while, you were raw dogging it. So that's good, fun. And you were ejaculating into her over and over again for however long you were dating her or whatever. Yeah. So then she has a kid, okay? And it's the next guy's kid, right? Genetically speaking, let's say the paternity next guy's kid. Well, if this is true, then that kid might actually, here's the implication. What if that kid actually comes out having some of your traits?
Yeah, but not just that, man. Just think of the potential child support that you have to pay. I mean, theoretically speaking, if the feminists get hold of this.
I mean, theoretically speaking, right, we've all had, let's say me. Theoretically speaking, I've had at least 10 epigenetic children, right?
Yeah.
Or
man, fucking hell. I don't even want to think about it.
Right? And people are like, well, if you're not genetically related to them, I'm like, well, this opens up that you don't have to be genetically related to someone to be related to them, right? That's the crazy part about this.
Right? Yeah, and going back to the brains, I mean, I remember reading that paper when they were discussing about microchimerism and brains, where they found Y chromosomes, and then they found distinctions or kind of diseases that might be more prevalent with the presence of the Y chromosome there. I think, was it Alzheimer's disease? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, right? It was Alzheimer's. It was correlated. I mean, it was correlated, and correlation is not causation, but yes, it was correlated. But
yeah, but you have to imagine, and I mean, you told me this. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just shocked the first time that you told me. The Y chromosome is not just sitting there, right? It's not sitting there. It's sitting there with another 45 chromosomes. Now, what the fuck do those 45 chromosomes express in that woman's brain or anywhere else in the body? We don't know. And we don't even understand why those cells are not being cleaved off or cleared off by the immune system. I mean, the antigen recognition that I talked about before might be a reason as to why this is happening. But if it is there, if the cell is sitting there, it must be doing something. Because if the cell is not doing something, it will die off, right? It will die off, it will be cleared off. The cell must be doing something in order to survive. It's not just going to be there and look beautiful. It will just do, it would do something. Now, whether it has a function in the brain, whether it has a function anywhere else, whether the DNA, foreign DNA as it is, of the males that gets transferred to the female might have something to do with the DNA. I mean, who knows, man? And I remember you told me that joke when when women complain, you know, I can't get him out of my head. Yeah, you can't, because he's there.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a female friend, and after reading, after reading a lot about microchimerism, where I do read a lot about it, I find it fascinating. Yeah, it was their ex-boyfriend, and she couldn't get over him, man. We were going out, and she just said, God, and I had shown this microchimerism data to her, so she didn't like that very much. But I remember, she's like, I can't get him out of my head, and I was like, yeah, that's because, like, literally a part of him is in your head, I was like, yeah, there's like, I said his Y chromosomes are probably quite literally in your brain right now. She didn't like that very much.
Well, to be fair, I've discussed this with females as well, and none of them liked it. No. None of them liked it because it's basically the way that I see it is a reason why, evolutionary speaking, scientifically speaking, if this is true, and it looks like it might be true, there is a reason why men do not like whoring about in females, because you're not getting 100% your child. I mean, it's already 50% your child. It might be 45. Who knows, right?
Let's not even go into the fact that the Y chromosomes are in there, and these are post-mortem women. So it's not like you ejaculate in her and the Y chromosome or in the cells that you pass along to her, because DNA doesn't just float around and it's stable. There's this DNA has to be in some type of cell, immunoglobulin, something. So let's not even go into the fact that your Y chromosomes are in their brain. Let's get into the fact that she's had 40 other dudes ejaculate into her and they didn't get her pregnant. Some of that ejaculate probably bathed her eggs. Okay, right?
Yeah.
Right? Bathed her eggs or got somewhere.
Yeah.
So, your child comes out and, he looks like you, but God, he kind of looks like the other guy, right? And it does, and it could be more subtle in humans. They might not look like the other guy. That doesn't mean there aren't changes made to them that are not a consequence of other sexual partners. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong that she had other sexual partners at all. I'm not judging at all. This is just scientifically speaking what I think might be happening. I think it's cool, personally, from a scientific standpoint. From a father standpoint, I guess it kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, it absolutely freaks you out. It freaks me out, man, because it might be little children running around, hairy looking, with a beard and everything, shouting, Nico, Nico. And they were not my children.
Now some of these girls that I slept with, I know a few of them are pregnant now, so like it's kind of weird. Like I'm like, oh God, when is he due? When's she due? And then I'm gonna have to go to the Facebook page and just look at the kid, be like, does he look like me? What does he have my eyes? It's kind of creepy. It's kind of cool, but it's kind of creepy in all honesty. And yeah. I don't know. Well, I do know it's a good mating strategy, personally. So, like, think about this: if you're a male, and if you're a male fly or male whatever, and you know that you can like bang a girl and pass on your something, not your genes, but something beyond the genes that is going to go into the child and be stable. But then you can go off and bang another couple of the females and not get them pregnant. But then the next male will bang her, but he'll be the one that will be stuck down with the kids, and he'll have to pay for the kids, right? Meanwhile, you still spread your epigenetic profile to a bunch of females without actually having to pay for the kid, right? But they're still made, at least in some part, in your image.
Well, in your image, there's a lot of there's a lot of people. Yeah, fucking creepy, man. I don't understand it. I think no one understands it. And whoever I've ever discussed this with, they seem to not want to accept it or not want to even entertain that idea, because I mean, as long as women control their reproduction, and that's what's been happening with with the invention of the female contraceptive pill, right, and all those other things, right? Geese has been flowing freely inside vaginas since. So yeah. This can potentially, if there is a mechanism, I mean, the potential implications, whatever it is, you don't really know anything. I mean, the child will be 100%, right? 50% the woman's and 50% the man's, right? That's what it's going to be. But
speaking, yeah.
genetically speaking, yeah. But genetics don't really show the. Oh my God, you don't know what will be expressed.
We put a lot of onus on genetics, and we should, but like genetics are only half the story, and they might be even less when it comes to, right? DNA doesn't have any power unless it's translated, transcribed, translated, blah, blah, blah. So the regulation of DNA, of the transcription to translation, right? The regulation is just as important as what is initially there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, people are saying that what if women could prove that in court? They can't.
No, I mean, yeah. We don't have the technology to be able to say, well, the baby has the epigenetic profile of this guy. We don't have that technology, not even fucking close. And it's so complicated, right? It's not just like 2 epigenetic marks. I mean, we're talking about hundreds, thousands of unique. We're dealing with like, Morse code with Morse code to the 100th power. Okay? We're dealing with the code that we don't understand. We understand about 0.001% of it. So no. Could they prove that? Not in this lifetime. Hell no. Absolutely.
I don't think they ever will. I mean, even if you know what the epigenetics is, you don't know what the epigenetic effect will be, how will that affect something. But if there is a mechanism there, then that will definitely put the full stop in why, women should not be whoring about, or why women shouldn't be having too many sexual partners, because the investment from the part of the man just completely goes down if you're not getting basically what you paid for.
And, essentially, I mean, it makes sense from a mating standpoint of why men, I mean, people always go, well, societally, men are, no, as men, we are, when we know girls had 100 partners, it's not only societally is looked down upon, but instinctually, right? It's instinctual that we kind of go, ugh, I don't know if I want in on that, right? It's just kind of it's instinct, right? And maybe our instincts, maybe our biology knows this, right? Has known this and goes, well, they might not have got her pregnant, but they passed along something, and I'm not willing to dip into that contaminated pool because it's not going to be all mine, right? Maybe our biology knows that. And it says to these women that had 100 partners, it goes, no, because, her eggs are sullied, right?
And the implications, I mean, outside that there's so many diseases, for example, autoimmune diseases and whatever, right? That theoretically speaking, for example, type 1 diabetes, there is a genetic correlation between father, mother, and son, or daughter. There is a genetic correlation, but it's not as strong of a genetic correlation. But theoretically speaking, if it's an autoimmune disease and you inherit the HLA types and all of that, there should be a genetic correlation, which is very, very strong. Now, if you factor other partners into it, maybe there is a genetic correlation there. How do we know? How do we not know? I mean, you never really ask. You ask for immediate family history as a doctor. Maybe you should be asking about immediate family history and the last 20 sexual partners for the female. Who knows?
And I get their genotype so I can see if they had any type of autoimmune or any type of autoimmune diseases that or not just autoimmune, just diseases that I should know about. And furthermore, if we think like this, then men act, genetically speaking, we're a lot like viruses, to be honest. Because viruses, right, they're their job, what they're doing is they're like, well, I'm going to put my DNA into the cell, and then the cell will propagate my DNA. So I'll be immortalized, right? I'll hijack the cellular machinery. Men are essentially going around, we're injecting our DNA into females, really. And I'm using DNA. We're injecting our profile into females. Okay, we're injecting our profile, our biological ID card into women that is just everything. We're injecting our biological ID card into women, just kind of like right, and then they'll carry on our biological ID card forever, for as long as they're mating.
Right? We don't just inject it there. I mean, the vagina is not the only orifice. I mean, okay, I'll discuss some disgusting stories so that we can all chill out a bit. All right. So I'm
sitting back. I'm ready. Go for it.
So as a doctor, right, I have come across one or two patients, I would say, that had a stoma. And you know what a stoma is, guys. If you have yep. Okay. A stoma is basically an operation that you have, and you remove a part of the intestine, then there is a hole in the skin of the abdomen, and then there is a bag that goes there. Yeah, you know where this is going.
Don't you dare. Fuck you, don't you dare.
So, right.
No, no.
There was one occasion that someone came in and had kind of like a tearing, I would say, in that area. So I was asking this woman, I'm like, what happened? I mean, it didn't look like it was ulcerated. It basically looked like it moved out of place, And she basically told me that her husband enjoyed having sex with her there. Now, if we understand that, and there is nothing right or wrong about that. There is something potentially dangerous with that. But I mean, I'm not going to judge people on what they enjoy.
I'm not judging. I'm just going to, I have a very imaginative mind. And I'm now, oh God. Okay. Yeah,
so men, we have all these weird fetishes, let's say. And if we assume that there is epigenetic modifiers in everything, you would assume there is a reason why men just unload their genetic product everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
It actually
there could be something to it. Yes, yeah. I'm serious.
No, it makes sense now that as a guy, I'm like, yeah, we'll unload it here. It's like, it doesn't, it's like, it's like everywhere. It's just like, it makes sense now if we can pass on our biological profile and doesn't need to get her pregnant, but we can pass on a biological profile without impregnating her. It kind of makes sense as a man now. It's like, yeah, I want to do it here. Just as long as it's somewhere in you, we're good. Honestly, if that's how it is, then yeah. And the anus is quite capillary dense and
and vascular.
And vascular and porous. So that's why you can get an STD through ejaculation into the anus. So
can you get an STD from a stoma?
I don't even know.
I'm saying potentially yes.
I've really, I thought I heard everything, and then you tell me this, and I go, this is just a whole nother box of just things that I got to sort through. I don't know, but in terms of anal sex, not stoma sex. In terms of anal sex, like if you ejaculate into her ass, that gets absorbed through her anal wall. Absolutely. Now, is it stable? I have no idea. But on the other hand, if all we need to do is get our ejaculate or our biological ID into her bloodstream and it goes to her brain, then, the anus is capillary rich, very vascular, soaks things up,
I mean, think about it realistically, right? I mean, viruses survive from there onwards. Why would cells not survive? I mean, they will potentially get cleared off a bit faster because they don't have a carrier, and when they settle somewhere, they might get cleared faster. But if they can cross, and let's say things as they are, I mean, sperm cells are tiny and they can swim.
Yeah. Oh, for Noven Hea. Oh, I don't think a stoma is gross at all. I'm thinking about having sex with a stoma. I didn't know that was possible, to be honest. Anything is possible. I guess I just never thought about it. No, stomas are fine. I know several people that have them. No, there's nothing. I just didn't know that you could do it.
Yeah, trust me, the surgeons the surgeons know about it, but they hear it very rarely. It is what I'm trying to say here is right. As men, we have a totally different outlook towards things, and we have this tendency, like you said, to infect everything, right? Not all of us do this. No, I mean, there's a lot of, let's say, religious, let's say, conditioning and whatever that changes people. There might be social conditioning on, you know, what's right and what's wrong and all that. But if you go down to the very basics, in cultures without any form of ethics or whatever, this kind of thing happens, right? So if there is an epigenetic effect, there is a reason why this drive exists in us, right? Because what made us what we are was probably, let's say, actions of our forefathers, so that I don't say fathers, right? And so we don't have weird images in our heads that did something similar.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, we know it's been shown in humans, it's been shown in rats, whereby the actions, the environment of your parents, of your grandparents, has an effect on you. Okay? How they lived, what they did, their lifestyle, their mental outlook has an effect on you that we can't even quantify yet, but we know it's there. We absolutely do. So these effects can have permanent, these things can have, is every epigenetic effect permanent? No. But are there permanent ones? Absolutely. Absolutely. The permanent epigenetic effect, I mean, when your chromosomes from your father or your mother gets passed on, it's not just DNA it's modified DNA. There's paternal and maternal epigenetic landscapes that are being passed on to you. And those are stable, and you'll pass those on to your kids if you have them. So, but how your fathers, your grandfathers, your grandmothers, how they acted, who they saw, if this is the case, then not only their lifestyle affected you, but their past sexual partners might very well. You might be a chimera of, well, how many dudes did they have sex with, right? Quite literally.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, absolutely. And every female that has had a child, at least from what they say, they are a chimera, and they do have functioning cells of that child in their brain. Mm-hmm. So that is actually the fact. Now, what the effect would be for us and all that, I mean, let me share a different medical fact, right? So when a baby exists within his mother's or her mother's body, so when the baby is a fetus, it gets affected by the female hormones that exist there. So if a baby boy is born, sometimes they're born with breast buds, right? So there is some breast tissue present.
Gynecomastia?
Yeah, they have gynecomastia when they're born. And then that gets resolved once the estrogens wear off. Yeah. Now, sometimes when a baby girl is born, following 3 to 4 days after delivery, they do have what they call vaginal bleeding. PV bleeding is what we call it in the UK. So pervaginal bleeding. That means that they're in essence having menstruation, right? So the effect of the genes and even the phenotyping and all that can occur at hormone level. If something can affect the DNA directly within the cell, it will definitely be something that will carry on, right? Because these kind of things almost have a tendency in recreating themselves. And in the flies that have a very short lifespan, even after 2 weeks, the epigenetic effect was still present. and that's in the absence of sperm cells. What that tells us is that if an effect lasts for 2 weeks, it's likely that the effect might be permanent.
I mean, absolutely. Furthermore, as I've said before, I mean, these women who they did post-mortem brain tissue. Okay, it's 40, 50 years later. Okay, and they still have these chromosomes in their brains. Right, that's some permanent shit.
Yeah,
okay? It doesn't go away. Okay, and it's in their brains. Okay, that's pretty impressive that they was able to get there. Right, that's not an easy feat to just get into the brain and to set up shop and to be stable. Okay, the body's pretty good at destroying anything that isn't self. It does that for disease and viruses all the time. Okay, how your cells that contain your DNA, or at least fragments of it or something, are able to not only survive but set up shop in her brain and even in her bloodstream and God knows what other tissue. Set up shop and stay there without being killed by her body and stay there stably. They're not just laying dormant. They're not just in G0. They're doing something. They're probably very metabolically active. They're transcribing the DNA. They're reacting like however a cell would react. I'm assuming that that there are cells that are harboring your DNA, because I don't think that we can just have, as far as I know, a chromosome just floating around in a bloodstream is going to be degraded. Their DNA is everywhere. So clearly they're encapsulated in some type of cellular apparatus, and then these cells set up shop in her body, wherever, in her brain, probably in her ovaries, and anywhere else, right? and they're metabolically active. They're reacting how a cell will react. They're probably talking with other cells too, sending signals. They're reacting to the hormones in her body. They're doing exactly what a cell would do, but they're not her cells. And yet they're not being killed by her body, but they're still going about their business. What that actually functionally means is crazy. I don't know.
I mean, let's say we've explored this issue, right? Let's say there is a potential mechanism there and something that we discussed now. As a scientist, which is what you are, right?
Yeah, I'm a nerd. Yeah. Yes, I'm a scientist.
What would be the next step?
What would be the next?
How would you investigate this further?
That's one thing I always ask. So what's the next experiment? What would you do after? Well, see, so you have to take it very basic, because these are huge questions we're asking, which are good questions. So, okay. So first of all, I would set up a model. I'd set up a model system in mice. That's just because I know mice really well. So I'm not saying Drosophila is bad. Drosophila is great. So I would use mice, because I'm a mouse guy. So what I would do is I'd have an experimental system where first I would try to recreate. When you see results like this, let's try to recreate them, because it was in Drosophila. So let's see if we can recreate it in mice. Okay. So first experimental condition, I have a virgin female. Okay, she's not housed with any males, and no sex going on for her. The second pair, then I have another female, virgin. I put her in a pair with one male, and they mate, but she's on for the rest of her life. She only mates with that male. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then the next female I have, she is the experimental female, right? We have a negative control, the virgin. We have a positive control, or ish control. We have the one partner, and then we have female with two partners. But let's say that the first male is we have a female with two partners, and we can put females on mice on birth control. We can do that. So we have her
seriously.
So we put her with partner one. She's sexually mature at this point though. So we put her on birth control, or you can give them like condoms. So you don't even have to even give her a chemical alteration. So that's even better. So we have her mate with the first guy, but we're on some birth control, so there's no pregnancy. But he gets in there, a few times. They do it a few times. Okay, no babies, right? And then we take him out. We put him in his own cage, and then we take second male, sloppy seconds guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. And we take her off whatever birth control mechanism she's on, and they just fucking go to town. And mice and rats, their litters are like every 21 days. It's unreal. So they have a bunch of babies. So then we take those babies, okay, and as a control, we have the female with one male. We have her offspring, right? We take those babies, and then we start to epigenetically profile them. And we have the epigenetic, and so we would pick some very common epigenetic markers on, say, the Y, or let's say the sex chromosome. So we would know that the epigenetic landscape of the second male, because we have him, and then we can compare that to the epigenetic landscape of the offspring thing on the sex chromosome. We could also look for, essentially you would be doing an epigenetic marker comparison between the babies and father one, or surrogate father whatever, and father two.
Yeah.
And looking for looking for differences, saying, are there epigenetic loci that match father one, who's not technically their father? Are there epigenetic loci that match father two, essentially?
Okay. How about we do one where we do a mini baby vasectomy to that mouse as well, and then we keep the female without any birth control, just to see if there is
even better. Exactly. We give him a vasectomy, so he's ejaculating everything inside her, but the sperm.
Yeah.
Well, he's ejaculating everything but the genetic code. So that's even better. And what would be even better was the female with one male. We take one of the males we have her mate with one of the two males.
Yeah.
With one of the two males, so we know that it's not a third male, so we know his chromosome, his profile. And essentially, you'd have to do ChIP-seq, lots of ChIPs, chromatin immunoprecipitation sequencing. You have to look at. You'd have to then look at basically broad epigenetic profiles, mass spec, at active and inactive loci, and you'd have to do a huge comparison. I mean, it's a large experiment. It's large. So if we could,
you just need a lot of cages with mice, man, and lots of time to watch them humping.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's funny. I always go down to the vivarium, and you just know which ones are just getting it on. Like they stop and they look at you. I'm just like, don't worry about me. Keep going. And then, I mean, and it's always fun. You go to the vivarium like the next day, and like you don't know sometimes if the females are pregnant or they're just really fucking fat. So like you just like go in and like one day you're like, God, you're so fat, let yourself go. And then you come in the next day and she like has like 15 babies. It's like, oh, all right then, yeah. They birth themselves, and so mice are constantly mating, so they're a great model system. They're a little more complicated than Drosophila. I'd say C. elegans might also be a good system, which are a nematode. They're a worm. Because we know every lineage where every cell comes from in C. elegans, like what lineage it comes from.
But it would be, I mean, if we can potentially see this effect in mammals, then we can basically make the assumption that this will be happening in human beings.
Yeah, I mean, what would be even more interesting is epigenetics, or as a scientist, like I put out a shitty experiment, and then I think about it more, and I'm like, oh, let's make it less shitty. So another way to make the experiment better was when you is to have the males have some type of epigenetic mark that is easy to see. So for instance, we know that coat color can be epigenetic. So you have one mouse that's an agouti, and then the other mouse is, say, a blue mouse. There are several different coat colors, and you can modify these. These mice have been engineered to have coat colors based on certain epigenetic profiles. So you know that this mouse has a brown splotch coat color because of epigenetic markers X, Y, Z, and A, B, and C, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's cool, right? So you give the first guy a vasectomy, and he has such a coat color that we know is epigenetic, right? He mates, but doesn't really mate because we vasectomied him. And then the second guy with a total different epigenetic coat color profile mates, but he gets her pregnant, and we know that by cytogenetic analysis and all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
What color coat did the babies come out with?
That will be the question. I'm just wondering.
That would be fucking weird, huh? Wouldn't that be interesting, huh?
I don't think anyone has ever asked that question ever. That is the problem.
Honestly, not on PubMed. I've looked. No one's ever asked that question. Right? Even if even if, you know, she has, you know, we take her through 4 litters and like 95% of the babies have the second mouse's coat color. Even if one baby, right, has the epigenetic coat color of the first mouse, that's huge, right? That is huge. That would be a huge finding, and no one's asked that question before. Not that I've seen in the literature anyways.
So, guys, what we're in essence saying that everything you've ever known about biology, about genetics, everything, absolutely everything is wrong. Not really, but what we're saying is that we have no idea how genes, well, not how genes are basically expressed and what factors help to their expression. It's as simple as that.
Question, has the fly experiment been replicated again? I'm sure they did replicates in their lab, but no. I think it was in 2014, so it's a pretty new paper, late 2014 so no. And furthermore, this has not been put into any other model organism. Now, flies are great, but I think the next logical step is to start not only replicating in flies, but to see, can we do it in mice, can we do it in rats, can we do it in C. elegans, you know, taking it up, you know, can we do it in Xenopus laevis, which are an African frog, really cool looking frogs, actually. Do it in zebrafish, you know, do it, I think would be taking this it's a broad experiment, but it's a cool result. Taking this macroscopic result and trying to replicate it in other model systems. Absolutely. And then once we can, if it's replicated, then getting down into what's the mechanism, right? And I'm a biochemist, so I love mechanism. I love the nitty gritty. So taking this broad macro and going micro and saying, okay, what's happening on the protein to DNA, protein to protein level? You know, what's happening on the near atomic level? That's what would be after that. It's really, really complicated, but it's totally happening. And totally off topic, Mayor of MGTOWN's channel got shut down?
Yeah, I just checked it now. Apparently, multiple third-party copyright claims.
What the hell did that guy do?
I have no idea, man. I've never seen any copyrighted material on. Maybe he used clips from news channels or something like that. Who knows, man?
Jesus, I'm sorry, guys. It's Neo Unplugged also, or totally off topic. Neo Unplugged also.
Yeah. No, he shut his channel down, and I don't know why. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, with the BBC documentary and whatever that was coming through, maybe he just wanted to step back. I don't know. I'm just making assumptions. I shouldn't really be suggesting anything.
No, bring it up. I saw it on the chat, and it made me sad.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see MGTOW, and we're totally sidetracking, by the way. It's all right. The way that I see MGTOW is, it is a journey until you find yourself, and then at some point it might be something that might be so toxic in your life. You know, the constant abuse and whatever you might be having from these people.
I mean, you know, yeah. I've stepped away, or I did. Absolutely. I find the stupid or the comments telling me I'm awful kind of funny now. I just have a good sense of humor about them. So they don't really bother me anymore. They used to bother me a lot, though. I do admit that.
Yeah, man. I mean, they still bother me. It still pisses me off that some random guy might just come there and just say, "You're full of shit." Nothing else. That's the comment.
That used to piss me off. They're like, "You're full of shit," and I usually ask them. I go, "Can you explain to me why I'm full of shit?" Just saying that I'm full of shit doesn't mean I'm full of shit. You know, I can say that I'm the president, but that doesn't make it a valid statement. But they usually never respond. But anyway, so sorry guys, back on topic. So essentially, it's interesting. This is another mating strategy, really, and it makes sense. I mean, why would DNA be the only thing you can pass on to someone, right? I mean, why? There's so many other things in the cell of DNA. There's non-coding RNAs. There's tRNAs, there's proteins, there's lipids, there's signaling molecules up the fucking wazoo, there's hormones, everything. And so this is really another way of mating, I guess you could say. Legacy. Genetic, well, not even biological biological legacy.
I mean, think of it like this. Why would you need to replicate yourself and go through all that trouble if you can alter the gene of something in order to resemble the gene that you are without giving any of your DNA in? It's the easy way of doing things. It's the cheap way of doing business.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes, I'm just using alpha and beta males not as like in a pickup artist way, but just as in a biological way, whereby, you have the guppies, right? You have or was it guppy? Yeah, it is guppies. Whereby there's the alpha male guppy, right? He's got his harem, but like there are those beta male guppies that actually they'll act like females. So that they can kind of like get in with the girls, and then like while he's not looking, they'll like start to like bang her. They'll start to like bang her while he's like away doing something, and they don't always get them pregnant. In fact, it's pretty low because they only have a couple seconds to do their business before he comes back. It's like, hey, what are you doing? Kind of thing, right? But if they can get in on that, right, and they can just bang her enough to bust one off, but maybe not get her pregnant. That could be enough to, pass on just a little something to the next generation, right? And so it's for all the beta males out there that are mating with the woman in secret, this is kind of another way to, to get offspring, if you will.
Yeah. And not just, it's anyone who basically doesn't use a condom.
Yeah, which I admit was me for a long time.
Yeah. 4 years and a bit, man, here.
Yeah, I admit it. I admit I was stupid. For all the guys saying, wow, you're an idiot. Not going to argue with you there. But yeah, I didn't use condoms for a while. Clearly I've used them. So now that I think of it, and none of these girls were pregnant, of course, great. But now that I think of it, if they have children, I'm like, well, yeah, I didn't impregnate them, but I did leave something behind.
Yeah.
Right? What did you leave behind? That's the crazy part.
Yeah, and that's I guess that is the major question, and I don't think we'll be able to answer it anytime soon unless people are already investing into research to answer these questions. I mean, the fact is this research will never be transferred to humans, but we can make educated guesses.
Absolutely not, because good God, if you think about this research being transferred to humans, how feminists, holy shit, they would have a shitstorm of just, because then, men could then start making the offhand remark, be like, well, you being promiscuous is actually, yeah, it's a problem, because their whole thing is, promiscuity, women can have sex like men, and they can, of course. A woman can have as many sexual partners as she pleases. It's not my business. But unfortunately, if there are consequences like these, then it can give men even more reason to really look at a woman that's had 30, 40 sexual partners and go, I don't know if I want to make you, the mother of my children, right? I don't know. She can have as many sexual partners as she wants, but it's just as much of our right as men, especially if with this type of research, to say, I might be dipping into a pool of eggs that's, that's already kind of, sullied. They've already been marked up. They have someone else's signature on them, quite literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the major question right now. I mean, since basically coming across this research, my mind has been blown completely, and I'm just waiting for more research to come out, something that could disprove this or prove this further. I mean, if this experiment gets replicated and it's shown in another lab, if this experiment gets replicated and it's shown in different animals, then we have our answer.
Yeah, and furthermore, what's interesting to me more than just if a woman's promiscuous, is I want to know what molecules are being right. I don't care scientifically what molecule is being passed on, what protein, what is being passed on to her that is doing this change. What? That's
it's definitely not the smell. It's definitely not just the mere presence of the man lying around. There is definitely an effect, and we don't know what it is. And I think it will take a good number of years until we find out. And maybe the answer will not come from a lab in the US or the UK or Australia or whatever. Something that does ethical research or feminist-friendly research.
Yeah, whenever they say ethical research, I go a lot of times, and I'm not saying that some research is unethical. No, there is unethical. But whenever people say, ethical research, especially in the United States, what I really go is, what they really mean is research that won't offend my sensibilities, honestly. Because there's a lot of research that can and should, like this research, should be done. But I guarantee you that feminists would say it's unethical, right?
Yeah, but and as a scientist that you are, you can definitely claim that. I'm not even a scientist, and I can see it from maybe a medical point of view. I mean, if we're not able to ask all the questions, absolutely any fucking question that crosses our mind, we will never find the answers. We will never find the cures that we seek. Everything might eventually happen, but everything will be just that much slower.
Yeah.
And it is subject to people dying off and not passing on their sensitivities or whatever.
Yeah.
Or a crisis hitting us, which is depressing to even think about.
To be honest, I'm not, people go, of course, should there be regulation? Of course, when I work with mice and I inject them with cancer, there is regulation. There should be, right? You have to treat them a certain way. You have to make sure there isn't pain. You have to make sure when you euthanize them that they're, it's not like we just go into these labs and we just, we do terrible things to, there is a rhyme and a reason for what we're doing. And so, of course, there needs to be regulation. Say this is, there needs to be protocol. Absolutely.
I think that at the point in time that we are right now, where you can basically download, I don't know, the anthrax molecule, and then you can just transfer the gene that produces anthrax and whatever in yeast, and then you can have like fuckloads of anthrax lying around very, very quickly. I don't think we're able to slow it down to that extent. I mean, research from people that have a brain should be done in a certain manner and should be allowed to speed up and go even faster than the research that.
Absolutely. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. I mean, I can make a virus with a hot oncogene in it, and I can carry that. I can make that in 2 days, right, in a hood, quite literally. Right, and that's hot. If I put that on my skin, right, I would probably get a tumor in about a week. No joke, on my skin. No joke. So a measly grad student can do that, right? So I can do that without anybody knowing. And I'm not saying I do that because it's for my job, but I can do that. So as you said, I agree. I mean, the cat's out. The technology is there. Anyone who wants to do bad things is going to do bad things. And it's actually not that hard. Not to make people scared, but it's true. It's not that hard. I'm not saying that tomorrow I can get, weapons grade plutonium. That's kind of harder. But in terms of research, there's all this regulation. You should, you can only grow a stem cell fetus for 8 days or whatever. I'm like, why not 16? What's going to happen? Right? What's going to happen at day 16? Is that the technology is already there, but it's just people telling scientists that what we can and can't do. I mean, I have certain things that I can and cannot do in my lab. I'll be honest, I think a lot of the things that I can and cannot do that they tell me are really fucking stupid. Yeah. Really. And because there's so many ways. I've had with the quote unquote ethics people or regular, I've had conversations with them where I've been like, you can just get around this by doing that. And I get the dumbest look on their faces. I'm like, they're like, well, it's so, they tell me that you can't do this, but you can't do this, you find another way. In terms of research, if a scientist is going to want to do something that someone would say is quote unquote unethical, they're going to do it. They just don't have to tell anybody. They just don't have to tell anybody about it, honestly.
And no one has a check on you on what you're doing all the time. So, I mean, you can potentially do that. And I think people think that this is difficult or, it's not just not difficult. I mean, there is viruses out there that can infect humans, that we have their structure, we have the viruses, we can modify the viruses, and we can add genes, remove genes, make them more virulent or whatever, and then you can create anything, right? You can create diseases, you can create cancer carrying viruses, you can do whatever you want. And I mean, this is proven, and people do this in the lab all the time. It is not something that is difficult at all. I mean, I remember I was telling you, I was doing experiments with one virus particularly, and I wanted to create my own cancer line back in the day when I was doing my own research in a lab.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't allow me to use my own blood.
Why not?
Reasons. It was,
yeah, let's go. Why not? It doesn't come from you. I mean, as long as it goes through all the testing to make sure it's safe and all that shit. I've drawn my own blood to do. Man, maybe I wasn't supposed to do that. Shit. I've drawn my own blood. I've used it. Absolutely. Why did? Because
I liked Logic's comment.
What?
I know you can deploy it through radio waves. Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber. God, just go away forever.
But yeah, man, it's there's a lot of red tape, and the red tape is not potentially doing any good. I mean, you can do a screening process, I guess, to make sure that someone is not a psychopath. Maybe.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But on the other hand, if we're going to get into psychopaths, I mean, psychopaths are really good at mimicry.
Yeah.
So, they could just, mimic away and be like, yeah, you're a normal person. They are a psycho. I mean, the scientific technology, the only thing stopping us, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be regulation or ethics. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that the only thing stopping us from getting to the next level of gene therapy and all that is us, really. Yeah. Is what we can and can't do. Now, I'm not saying that if the regulations were taken off tomorrow, that by next Friday, we would have a cure for everything. No, absolutely not. But it is in asking the questions that are quote unquote dangerous, or doing the experiments that people might not like, that we're going to get the coolest answers. Doing an experiment that someone deems unethical, like, unless you're killing a dog in the experiment, are you doing anything really unethical? No, you might get results that might make them uncomfortable, right? And I find that many people that say something is unethical, it's not the experiment that's actually unethical. Most of the time, it's actually that the potential for the results scare them, right? Just like what we're talking about, right? Think about if this research, I'm not saying it can be done. I don't think it can be done, but think about it, right? Think about if this research had been done in humans, right? And it was ethical somehow, right? I guarantee you feminists would be more scared of the potential results than they would be of the actual experimental design.
I mean, the experiment would just be fun for at least 3 people.
Yeah, it would just be a lot of people doing it. I'm not saying they should do it in humans, but what I'm saying is that when people say something is unethical, a lot of times feminists would say this is unethical. What they're really, to convert it into man speak, is that I'm afraid of these results because I'm afraid that now there could be a scientific basis for me being a slut, and that might be bad, right? Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. It might bring the patriarchy that never existed back.
There might give scientific credibility to why it might not be advantageous for a woman to be promiscuous, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that would have negative implications on them. So that's why they would say it's unethical. For all these things that are, I mean, for essentially what men are doing, while we're ejaculating into women and not getting them pregnant, is we're infecting them like a virus. We're doing basically some type of gene therapy, essentially.
What I'm worried about is women claiming gene rape after,
Jesus,
I don't know, years and years of separation.
Oh my God. Gene rape.
That is another. Yeah, I mean, who knows, man? They can basically say whatever. Yeah.
No, crazier shit has happened before. Yeah, I mean, let's see, what rename slut walks to Million Man marches. Yeah, I mean, it always, just from a societal standpoint, I hated to judge women on this because I'm like, I've been promiscuous in my years, and so I don't think of a woman when she says I've had, say, 30, 40 partners. I don't think of her as a bad person. There's nothing wrong with her wanting to get it on, with a lot of people, as long as it's safe, consensual, and usual. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as a man, I reserve my right to be able to discriminate whether I want her as a partner.
Not just a partner, as a potential carrier of your genetic material into the next generation.
Right. She has the right to do whatever she wants, but I have the right, especially with this science, which has been thinking, to say, I don't know, I have a right to say your eggs are kind of tainted, right?
Yeah.
And not tainted with my color.
Yeah. And I'm telling you guys, every female I've ever discussed this with, even doctors, scientists, whatever, right? I've discussed this with them because I wanted to get kind of like a first response of what their opinion might be on this subject, if it was true. I mean, and they all refuted it. They said it can't be true. This paper is completely false, because of reasons.
Yeah, reasons, right?
There is no scientific reason on what they were telling me. It was just an emotional response, and that's why I said maybe they might say we gene raped them. Who the fuck knows, man? And
for all the women that, maybe there's some listening, I don't know, whoever listens to this, for all the women are saying, that's not that, reasons. Remember this, and this goes for anything in life. You can think that something is false, but the truth is the truth. Whether you want to live in your own reality distortion is irrelevant. The truth is still the truth. The data is the data. You can yell at me or you can yell at men and say that we shouldn't do this as much as you want to. And you can yell at the paper, but the paper is not going to get scared and run away and change its data to make you happy. The data is the data, right? It's out there. It's on the interwebs. It's on PubMed. It's not going to be taken off anytime soon. The field of microchimerism is blowing up. So the data is the data. So, when females, when your situation was the same as mine, where they were like, they refuted and they go, that's not true.
Yeah.
They have no reason to say it's untrue other than it makes them emotionally uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you can just tell them, okay, look at the stats, look at the significance of the
Right.
finding, look at how many people.
They can say all they want that it's not true,
Yeah.
but their eggs are still inside them, right? Okay, right? They can say it's not true. That's not going to make their eggs suddenly go, well, okay, you're right, it's not true, right? The DNA is there, or whatever, it's there, and it's not changing anytime soon.
Yeah, and it was the first time, man, that I've ever had the worst response to something ever since I suggested hypergamy to females. I mean, it was that bad. It was like, no,
Yeah,
not true.
One I had it. When I suggested it, I had it pretty bad because they automatically tell me, they go, well, a woman can have as many partners as she wants. I go, yeah. I was like, you can do whatever you want. The thing is, I don't care what they do, really. If I'm not sleeping with them or I'm not trying to mate with them, I don't really give a shit what they do. But the thing is that they say they can do whatever they want, but they don't realize that there are consequences to their actions. And there could be epigenetic consequences to their actions, right, that they can't quantify.
The consequences are not just for them. I mean, for the potential provider that will come afterwards, there could be consequences for that poor man as well.
Yeah, and for the guys
to remember that.
To this, I'm not. If you are getting with a woman for whatever reason, you're thinking about having kids with her, and that's fine. That's great. Her sexual history, she'll say it's none of your business, and she doesn't have to tell you. It's her choice, whatever. But on the other hand, I want you to really think scientifically about this, because this is true. If you don't believe me, go to www.pubmed.com and put in the search bar telegony. Telegony. And there you'll have 1,000 hits over. Read the papers. And then I want you then right after to go and PubMed, the same site, microchimerism. It's one word, and I'll spell it out for you. Micro, so micro, and then chimerism, CHIMERISM. And then you can read those human studies as well. Go through all the literature, comb through it. We're not making this shit up. And so if you are thinking about getting a woman pregnant, having a kid with her, which is fine. Her sexual history, she'll say it's none of your business, and yeah, it's none of your business, but it kind of is your business in a little bit of a way, scientifically speaking. She doesn't have to tell you, but I would try to make it your business because it might matter. I mean, really, if you're going to impregnate this woman, then I hate to say it, but you have to know her eggs are of still good quality.
And remember, guys, whatever she says, multiply that by 3.
Yeah, by 3. So about 18, roughly speaking. And if they said they never had a one-night stand, they're probably lying. Just FYI.
Oh, man, this is just a depressing field of research.
No, depressing is awesome.
I mean, man, I'm just going to press my epigenetic material everywhere. I mean, that's what I'm doing anyway. So
just like put it on the sidewalk. The sidewalk might like it. You never know. Right? You have no idea. What happens. The sidewalk, the tree. You don't even know. We're just, if things take up DNA so easily, which they do. I mean, well, now I gotta think. Where has my DNA? Okay. Yeah.
I'm just spelling it out. Microchimerism telegony for people to Google. Right.
Whether diseases on some issues could carry forward epigenetically. Yes, diseases on some way, shape, or form could absolutely carry forward epigenetically. Absolutely. For instance,
it's very simple, man. You can explain these things with very small examples. For example, twins do not always get affected with the same condition, even if that condition has a strong genetic link, like type 2 diabetes or whatever, right? Epigenetic modifiers exist in all of us, and epigenetic modifiers can vary from person to person, and they change with the lifestyle as well. But if there is, let's say, a genetic condition, not a genetic, let's say a strongly genetically linked condition, it could be something that is epigenetic, and the majority of things are epigenetically awakened. Even psychopathy, for example, is something, it has genes that get awakened epigenetically. So there is a lot of variation. And if that epigenetic modifier gets transferred from another partner, then, I mean, you need to think about that, and you need to think about the consequences that might be in play here. There's a lot of things.
Absolutely. And again, to the future women that will hate on this video, is that I think it's cool, personally. I would want to study this. To the future women that will listen to this video, you can have as many sexual partners as you want. We don't care. We just think from a scientific standpoint that that impregnating someone isn't the only way to pass on your biological legacy, which is cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
For men, at least. I guess for women, it's a little. For me, it's kind of cool. Now I'm like, whoa, cool.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless. Now, if you are a female,
have I already had a kid? I don't know.
You realistically, we would have never really had a kid, but I mean, we could have potentially have affected the DNA expression.
Have I had an epigenetic child? I don't know. It's kind of cool. A mechanism of gene transfer. So that's which I think why this should be studied is the mechanism of gene transfer of how the genes are being transferred, of what is being transferred, and how it can actually affect the phenotype of the offspring. That if those mechanisms were uncovered, because they're clearly very good, if they can even get into the brain. Yeah. Think about that. If we can uncover that type of mechanism for how the cells are doing that, how the genes are even transferred into the brain, implications for treatment of brain disorder, dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
Would be incredible, right? This whole new mechanism of biological transfer. If we could find this vehicle, whatever the vehicle is for inputting, genes long term into patients that have genetic disorders, epigenetic disorders, this could be very good medical tools.
Yeah, it would be a good way to transfer medication or genes or whatever to fix these disorders.
The hardest part I already think about is the brain. So much of the pharmacokinetics is they always go, well, for a lot of these Parkinson's drugs, they're like, well, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, that's why it's ineffective. If we could find out how these cells, if we can use whatever type of cellular apparatus is in sperm to cross the blood, to take our drugs to cross the blood-brain barrier to stay stable in the brain for 40 years, that would be incredible to treat Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, and a plethora of other diseases.
Man, I live for the day where I can say with proof that my dick is the cure. It would be awesome.
Like, hey, baby, you want some medicine? Come on over. Come on and get it, right? I think it would be, you could modify men so their ejaculate has curative properties.
The saviors of humanity and all diseases of old age.
Just modify the men so out of our semen comes gene therapy. It's so.
And it would be fucking what do you call it? It would be the first medication that would be PV administered, right? It would be vaginal administration. Oh my God, man, we're going into a dangerous field right now.
So it says from dangerously awesome. DK, you're the reason why such loose behavior is prevalent. Next time you wonder why the world is the way it is, look in the mirror, buddy. Your kind is letting it happen. Oh.
So it's your fault that you're sleeping with this woman, man.
It is? Oh, okay.
Do you feel bad? Do you feel bad about it?
No, not at all. Like I said to Auto Jack, I don't really care what they do, and it's not my responsibility. If these women can do whatever they want, I can't stop them. It's a free country. The only thing we can do is arm people with knowledge and say, you probably shouldn't do this because X, Y, and Z. But to say that my kind is letting it happen, I have no control over what these people do. So I'm not exactly sure what you, Auto Jack, would want me to do.
He would want you to put women back in their place, put them back in the kitchen, make them do some sandwiches.
So the thing is, as awesome as that might sound, it's not my job. I have other things to do. I have science to do, and so my kind is letting it happen. What do you want me to do? Go around police women and say you can't do this? That's not going to. Hasn't that been done by every man, and it hasn't worked?
Not just that. That's what the MRA wants. The whole point of MGTOW, and I will say this, supporting myself in this, is that we can only say what's the best thing or what you can do as an individual in order to avoid this kind of things.
Honestly, dude, MGTOW, by just letting and promoting and allowing, I never said I'm promoting it at all. I'm not promoting the behavior, and I'm not. Exactly what do you want me to do?
You're promoting it by allowing it. Okay, from now on, I want you to be walking around using a gun, right? So just shoot every man who has slept with more than one woman. Just kill him.
Auto Jack, that is the most. I'm just gonna say that is the most retarded logic, really, because terrorism is happening right now, and so I'm allowing it to happen because I'm not doing anything. So am I promoting terrorism? It's not my responsibility. I never said it was. Again, so essentially it's my job to go around policing everybody and to just, what do you want me to do? Go around police every woman and put a chastity belt on her?
I know what I want you to do. You can potentially right-click that idiot and then just block him.
Oh, I just think it's hilarious. Auto Jack, your logic is ridiculous.
It's retarded.
Yeah,
that's
it's
what it
absolutely retarded. But I would like to use you as an example of MGTOW is men going their own way. It's not men going and policing everyone else's behavior. Okay, that's not my job. And I not only even if it was my job, I have no way of doing that. Nico, can you think of any reason to how any mechanism for how we could do that?
I told you, just kill off all the men that are potentially doing that. Yeah. It sounds absolutely logical, because we're promoting that. Therefore, any man who has slept with more than one woman is not absolutely monogamous is doing that. Or we can just kill off all the women, right? I mean, what the hell are you suggesting here? We're not promoting anything. Whatever anyone wants to do with their genitals is their fucking business.
Exactly. If you want me to put tracking devices on everyone's genitals, then by all means go. Send me 1 billion tracking devices, and we can start policing everyone's genitals and our own. But not only is that logic absolutely moronic, but it's also unrealistic. People are gonna fuck, and they're gonna fuck how they want. I'm not talking about it from a moral standpoint at all. Morals to me don't matter here. What matters to me is the scientific basis of it. I think that's cool.
Yeah, and it's just the truth. We will state facts. We will state what we understand. Whatever you guys take, whatever the fuck you guys do with the knowledge that we're passing on is your business. I have no say in what you do in your actions or whatever. And it would be very obnoxious, I would say, of me to assume that I have any effect in your actions. I mean, just seeing the comments just on my channel, I can pretty much tell that I'm having no effect whatsoever in the majority of people. The very few people that I am affecting positively, at least, and they do tell me, good. I mean, all we can do here is offer the truth, offer what we know, offer what we understand, offer our own experience. And after that, what you guys do is up to you. We're not your fathers. We're not anything else, right? That's what we're doing.
And that's the thing, is that we bash on feminism for them taking away personal responsibility from women. Well, if we're saying that we are promoting personal responsibility, so in essence, isn't it everyone's job to police themselves if that's what we're promoting?
Absolutely.
Right? It's their job. It's not my.
It's a very gynocentric point of view, Jack. It's a very gynocentric point of view.
It's everyone else's job to police themselves, because we promote going your own way freedom. But if we're automatically telling people that we're going to keep counters on your genitals, which would be hilarious, then we are policing everyone else and taking personal responsibility and autonomy away from them, including ourselves, which would be. I wouldn't want to have a counter on my.
I mean, if you want to support that kind of ideology, I'm pretty sure you can find a lot of support by going to feminism. They really want to do that. They'll even filter your freedom of speech and everything that you enjoy. And then you can pretty much go join them and do whatever you want. I mean, we don't support that. We do not endorse that.
No, freedom of knowledge. I mean, what it's all about is it's knowledge. What you do with the knowledge, that's the crazy part. Whatever you do with the knowledge is yours, right? I mean, if this makes you not want to sleep with women that have had 100 partners, by all means. If you don't care, then by all means. It's totally up to you. The knowledge is the knowledge. The data is the data. It's only when humans interpret the data that we have differings of opinion, right? The knowledge will be the knowledge. Right? That won't change. It's just your actions after knowing such a thing that will.
I never thought we would trigger a man by saying this. Oh well, that happened.
I mean, the thing is I'm not promoting and I'm not denying promiscuity. It is what it is.
Yeah. Promiscuity has been around since the beginning of time. I mean, promiscuity was there even at the lesser level than what it is now. And I don't even think it's promiscuity if single people are just getting it on, right? People can do whatever they want to, and we should always remember that people are adults, females, and men and women.
Are right? Adults. Absolutely, men are absolutely adults
with a full control of their mind, and they can make their decisions. Who was it? Stardust was saying there is no freedom of will, and there is no free will, whatever, right? And there is no free will if you look into the neuroscience and all of that, if you go into that type of research. But I have stated in a video that your consciousness is an interplay of the knowledge that you have, your experiences, the experiences that you have, the knowledge that you have, along with the input that's going into your brain right now, and the emotions, everything just gets mixed together, and you have a movie that plays in front of your very eyes, right? When that is happening, what we can offer, if we are offering anything, is just increase that amount of knowledge that you can have in your brain, and hopefully that will aid people making more rational decisions.
Yeah, for HD failure, truth is hard to find, even harder to accept. That's absolutely true. Truth is very hard. I mean, very hard to find. It's even like people go, the truth, the truth will set you free. But the truth is actually, like, for instance, telling this quote unquote scientific truth. I mean, the data is good, so I stand by what they did. To a female, right, it's harder to accept because the truth is actually usually like it's the thing that, it's the most uncomfortable thing to accept, usually. Right? Usually it's the lie that's the easiest to accept, but the truth is the harder thing to accept, especially being that, essentially this epigenetic meeting is what I'll call it. Essentially, it's the truth that, you're having 100 partners might come back to bite you in a way.
I mean, man, this beliefs and all of the things that we hold dear doesn't just affect that. I mean, even Einstein had a problem with quantum mechanics, and Einstein was a fucking intelligent man by all extents of understanding. At least he was a fucking intelligent man, right? But when quantum mechanics came along, he said God doesn't play with dice, right? But even though we do not understand shit, quantum mechanics stands time and time again to experimentation, right? It is proven time and time again. Therefore, even if something makes you uncomfortable, the science always holds the truth and doesn't give two shits if you feel uncomfortable
about and that's what I love about science. It doesn't care. Is that the bar graph is not going to like change because it makes you feel bad about yourself. It just will be. And that's the hardest part, is to admit in science that what I believe is completely false, or it's not the whole story. But the great part about science is that it's truthful. If experiments are done right and they're replicated right, and other people do them, and there's oversight, when the data comes out, it is right. It is what it is, and you just got to work with it, and you just got to accept it. And that's what's so great about it. It doesn't care if you feel bad. It doesn't care if you feel good. It just is.
Yes.
It's like
I think that's a high point to end this, man.
I think that's good. We actually had 39 people watching. That's pretty impressive.
There is 40 people watching right now. There was 41. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for coming out and watching. I hope the scientific talk was good for you guys.
And didn't scare too many people.
For all the women that are going to listen to this, they're going to be like, the look on her face when I showed her this data was just priceless. It was amazing.
Yeah, every person I've ever spoken to about this.
That look of horror where they're like, you can see that it's like their life flashing before their eyes, but instead of their life, it's all their sexual encounters flashing before their eyes, and it's like you look at them, you go, I know what you're thinking about right now. I know exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah, just go and find all of your friends that you know what they were doing. I mean, all your female friends that you know what they were doing, and just share with them.
Go on PubMed, show them the data, show them it's true, and then come back and tell us their reactions, because those are priceless.
Yeah. All right, guys, you take care.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you, everyone.